The dust-laden winds of Wyoming Territory in 1879 carried whispers about Beatrice Lawson, the woman too poor to marry, too stubborn to leave, and too proud to beg. With calloused hands and a weathered face that belied her 22 years, Beatrice stared at the eviction notice nailed to her cabin door, the final insult after a year of hardships that had stripped away everything but her dignity. 3 days, she whispered to the empty air, her voice catching as she crumpled the notice in her fist. The small homestead had been her parents' dream before the fever took them both last winter, leaving Beatrice with nothing but debts and memories. The walk to town stretched 5 miles across parched land. Beatrice made it in just over an hour, her patched skirts gathering dust, her eyes fixed on the sprawling settlement of Promise Creek. Once there, she headed straight for the bank, steeling herself for the meeting she'd been putting off for weeks. Mr. Hargrove, the bank manager, barely looked up when she entered. "Miss Lawson, I was wondering when you'd come to discuss your situation." His tone suggested he hadn't been wondering at all. "I need more time," Beatrice said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Just until harvest. The corn is coming in well this year." Hargrove's laugh was dry as the Wyoming summer. "That little patch of corn won't cover half what your father owed. Besides, the land's already been sold." "Sold?" The word felt like a slap. "You had no right." "I had every right, Miss Lawson. Your father borrowed against that land and the loan's been in default since February." He adjusted his spectacles. "The new owner takes possession on Monday. I suggest you start packing." Beatrice left the bank in a daze, bumping into a tall figure on the boardwalk. Strong hands steadied her and she looked up into eyes the color of a summer storm. "Whoa there," said a deep voice. "You all right, madam?" She pulled away, embarrassed. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." The stranger tipped back his hat, revealing a face tanned by sun and wind. "Owen Quinn," he offered, extending a hand. "Just rode into town." Beatrice ignored his hand. "Beatrice Lawson." "And I really am fine, Mr. Quinn." His eyes, too perceptive for comfort, studied her face. "Well, Miss Lawson, seems to me that fine folks don't usually come tearing out of banks looking like they've seen a ghost. It's nothing that concerns you." She attempted to step around him. "Maybe not," he agreed, falling into step beside her. "But I've found that troubles shared are troubles halved, and I'm a good listener." Something in his manner, the lack of pity, perhaps made Beatrice pause. "They've sold my land," she said finally. "The land my parents worked for 15 years. I have until Monday to leave." Owen Quinn let out a low whistle. "That's rough. No family to help?" "None." Beatrice lifted her chin. "But I'll manage. I always do." "I don't doubt it," he said, and the respect in his voice surprised her. "Still, seems like you could use a friend right about now." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted further down the street. A wagon had overturned, spilling barrels across the dusty road. People rushed to help, and Owen Quinn touched the brim of his hat. "Pardon me, Miss Lawson. Looks like they could use another pair of hands." Beatrice watched him stride toward the accident, his movements confident and unhurried. Then she turned away, forcing her mind back to the problem at hand. She had 3 days to figure out where to go and how to get there with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's silver locket around her neck. The general store was her next stop. Mr. Peterson had known her family for years. Perhaps he would extend credit for supplies. The bell jingled as she entered, and Mrs. Peterson looked up from behind the counter. "Beatrice, dear, we were just talking about you." Beatrice tensed. In a town this size, news traveled faster than wildfire. "Mrs. Peterson." "Such a shame about your place," the older woman continued, oblivious to Beatrice's discomfort. "Have you thought about what you'll do? Martha Simmons is looking for a girl to help with her boarding house." The thought of scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots for Martha Simmons, whose sharp tongue was legendary in Promise Creek, made Beatrice's stomach turn. But what choice did she have? "I appreciate the suggestion," she managed. "Actually, I was hoping Mr. Peterson might allow me to purchase a few supplies on credit, just until I'm settled." Mrs. Peterson's sympathetic expression faltered. Oh dear, I'm afraid that won't be possible. With the dry summer, we've had to tighten our belts considerably. It was the answer Beatrice had expected, but it stung nonetheless. I understand. The bell jangled again, and Owen Quinn entered, carrying a sack over one shoulder. He nodded to Beatrice as if their earlier meeting had established some kind of connection between them. "Afternoon, ladies," he said, setting his burden on the counter. "I'm in need of provisions, new in town and setting up camp." Mrs. Peterson's demeanor changed instantly. "Welcome to Promise Creek, Mr. Quinn, Owen Quinn. Are you passing through or planning to stay, Mr. Quinn?" He smiled, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. "That depends on what I find here, madam." While Mrs. Peterson bustled about filling Quinn's order, Beatrice slipped out of the store. The afternoon was waning, and she needed to start back if she wanted to reach the homestead before dark. She was halfway across town when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Lawson?" She turned to find Owen Quinn approaching, his arms full of parcels. "Mr. Quinn, I thought you might like some company on your walk home." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "I know the way asked in town, and I've got supplies to share." "I don't need charity, Mr. Quinn." His smile was easy without a trace of condescension. "Not offering charity, Miss Lawson, just neighborliness. Where I come from, folks help each other out." "And where is that exactly?" "Montana, most recently. Before that, Texas. I tend to follow the work." Curiosity got the better of her. "What kind of work?" "Whatever pays honest wages." He shifted his parcels. "Drove cattle for a spell, worked claims during the Silver Rush, broke horses for the Army. A jack of all trades." "Master of none," he agreed good-naturedly. "But I get by." They walked in silence for a time, the rhythmic crunch of their footsteps on the dusty road strangely companionable. "So what brings you to Promise Creek?" Beatrice asked finally. "Not much work to be had around here." "Heard tell of a ranch needing hands for the fall roundup. Thought I'd try my luck." "The Circle P, that's the one." Beatrice frowned. "Patrick Porter owns that spread. He's the one who bought my land." Owen's stride faltered. "Is that so? Well, that's unfortunate indeed." Another silence fell, more awkward than the first. "I won't take the job," Owen said suddenly. Beatrice looked at him sharply. "Don't be ridiculous. You need work and Porter needs hands. What happens with my land has nothing to do with you." Still doesn't sit right. "Mr. Quinn, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not your responsibility." She picked up her pace. "Besides, I've never been one to stand in the way of another person making a living." The homestead came into view as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The small cabin, weathered but sturdy, stood alongside a barn that listed slightly to one side. A chicken coop occupied the far corner of the yard, and beyond stretched the modest cornfield that represented Beatrice's last hope for independence. "It's not much," she said defensively as they approached. Owen surveyed the property, his expression thoughtful. "Looks like honest work to me. Your father built this place with his own hands. Started with just the cabin, added the rest as they could afford it." Pride warmed her voice despite her efforts to remain detached. "And you work it alone now?" Beatrice nodded, leading the way to the cabin. "Since winter." Inside, the cabin was clean and spare, a table with 3 chairs, a small stove, shelves holding the few books her mother had treasured, and a narrow bed in the corner. A curtained-off section presumably hid another sleeping area. Owen placed his parcels on the table. "I brought coffee, flour, bacon, and beans," he said, unpacking them. "And this." He produced a bottle of whiskey. Medicinal purposes only, of course. Despite everything, Beatrice found herself smiling. Of course. He stayed for supper, beans and cornbread that Beatrice insisted on making with her own supplies, and as darkness fell, he rose to leave. "I've set up camp about a mile east," he said, reaching for his hat. "If you need anything." "Thank you, Mr. Quinn, for the company and the kindness." He paused at the door. "You know, there might be a way to challenge the sale. If your father's loan wasn't properly documented." "It was," Beatrice sighed. "I checked. Everything's legal, if not entirely fair." Owen's expression hardened. "Legal doesn't always mean right." After he left, Beatrice sat alone at the table, fingering her mother's locket. Inside were miniature portraits of her parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful, with no idea of the hardships that lay ahead. She'd sworn to keep their dream alive, but now it was slipping through her fingers like the fine Wyoming dust. The next morning, Beatrice woke at dawn as always, despite knowing that every chore she performed was essentially meaningless now. She fed the chickens, drew water from the well, and was about to start on the washing when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Owen Quinn rode up on a handsome bay gelding, leading a second horse, a sturdy paint mare, behind him. "Morning, Miss Lawson," he called, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Mr. Quinn, you're out early. Thought I might lend a hand today. Noticed your fence could use some mending." Beatrice crossed her arms. "Why would I mend a fence on property that won't be mine in 2 days?" Owen shrugged. "Maybe not. But those chickens still need containing, and I reckon they're coming with you wherever you go." She hadn't thought that far ahead. The chickens, her tools, her parents' few possessions, what would she do with them? "I appreciate the thought, Mr. Quinn, but Owen," he interrupted. "If we're going to argue, might as well use my Christian name." "Owen, then," she hesitated, "and I'm Beatrice." His smile was warm. "Beatrice." By midday, they had repaired the chicken coop fence, and Owen had reinforced the wagon that had been sitting unused since her father's death. "Where will you go?" he asked as they sat in the shade, drinking water from Beatrice's well. She traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. "I don't know. My father had a cousin in Denver. I've never met him, but he might be willing to take me in until I find work. Denver's a long way." "Everywhere's a long way from here." Owen was silent for a moment. "There's something I need to tell you, Beatrice." The seriousness in his tone made her look up. "What is it?" "I know Patrick Porter. Worked for his father years back in Texas. Never cared for the son, too eager to build his empire, no matter who got hurt in the process." He paused. "When I heard he was setting up in Wyoming, I decided to pay him a visit." "Why?" "Old scores," Owen said simply. "Nothing that need concern you." "But when I rode in and heard about what was happening to your place, well, it seemed like more than coincidence." Beatrice studied him, trying to reconcile this new information with the friendly stranger who had appeared so fortuitously in her life. "So your offer to help wasn't just neighborliness." "It started that way," he admitted. "But then I met you." Something in his voice made her heart skip, but she pushed the feeling aside. "I still don't understand what you want from me." "Nothing, everything." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. "I want to help you keep your land, Beatrice, and I think I know how." Hope flared briefly before she tamped it down. "How?" "Porter wants this land because he thinks there's something valuable here. Something your father may have discovered." "That's ridiculous. My father was a farmer, not a prospector." "Are you sure about that? This part of Wyoming has seen its share of small gold finds, nothing like California or Colorado, but enough to make a man wonder." Beatrice shook her head. "If my father had found gold, he wouldn't have died in debt." "Unless he didn't know what he had," Owen suggested, "or didn't have time to act on it." The idea was absurd, yet Beatrice couldn't help remembering her father's excitement in the weeks before his final illness. He'd spent long hours in the north section of their property, returning home tired but strangely animated. "Even if there was something," she said slowly, "how would that help me now? The bank has sold the land. The sale isn't final until Monday. If we could find proof of something valuable, you might be able to secure a new loan, or at least negotiate better terms." It was a wild plan born of desperation, but what did she have to lose? "All right," Beatrice said. "Where do we start?" Owen's grin was infectious. "Your father must have kept records, papers, anything that might give us a clue where to look." The search took them through every inch of the cabin, from the loose floorboard beneath her parents' bed to the rafters above the stove. By sunset, they had found nothing more revealing than her father's farming journal, with its meticulous notes on rainfall and crop yields. Discouraged, Beatrice closed the journal. "It's no use. If he found anything, he didn't write it down." Owen, who had been examining the walls of the root cellar, emerged with cobwebs in his hair. Maybe he didn't write it down because he didn't want anyone else to know. Who would he have been hiding it from? Claim jumpers, tax assessors, bankers. Owen brushed off his shirt. Gold makes people cautious. Beatrice leaned against the table, suddenly tired. This is pointless. Even if there is gold, we'll never find it in time. We have one more day, Owen reminded her, and I brought something that might help. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. A map of mining claims filed in this area over the last 20 years. Your father's property is right here. He pointed to a spot on the crude map. Notice anything? Beatrice studied the paper. There are claims all around us, but none on our land. Exactly. Why would prospectors file claims everywhere but here? Owen's eyes gleamed. Unless someone deliberately steered them away. My father, or someone who knew what he knew. The next morning they rode out at first light, armed with shovels, picks, and the map. Owen led the way to the northern section of the property, where the land grew rocky and unsuitable for farming. Your father would have needed water for sluicing, he explained, scanning the terrain. A creek, maybe, or a spring. Beatrice pointed to a stand of cottonwoods in the distance. There's a spring there. We used it for irrigation until it started to run dry last summer. The spring was little more than a trickle now, seeping from between rocks and disappearing into the parched earth a few feet away. Owen dismounted and began examining the surrounding area, his movements methodical. What exactly are we looking for? Beatrice asked, following his lead. Signs of digging, tailings, anything that looks man-made rather than natural. They searched for hours, the summer sun beating down relentlessly. Beatrice was about to suggest they try another location when Owen called her over. Look at this. He pointed to a narrow crevice in the rocks, partially obscured by brush. Someone's cleared this recently. Pushing aside the branches, they discovered a small opening, just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Cool air wafted out, carrying the dank smell of earth and stone. Your father's height or mine? Owen asked, crouching to peer into the darkness. My father was tall like you. Owen nodded. Then he would have had to stoop just like this. He pulled a small lantern from his saddlebag. Stay here, I'll check it out. Absolutely not, Beatrice said firmly. This is my land, my father's discovery. I'm coming with you. Their eyes met in silent argument before Owen relented. Stay close then, and be careful. The passage widened after a few feet, opening into a small chamber where they could stand upright. Owen held the lantern high, revealing walls streaked with quartz veins. Gold, Beatrice whispered. Maybe. Owen moved closer to one wall, running his fingers along a pale streak. This looks promising. Hand me the pick. He worked carefully, chipping away small samples and examining them in the lantern light. After several minutes, he let out a low whistle. What is it? Owen held out his palm where several small fragments glinted dully. Not gold, he said. Silver. Beatrice stared at the tiny pieces. Silver, are you sure? Pretty sure. And if I'm right, this vein could be worth more than Porter's entire ranch. Owen's face was serious in the lantern light. Your father found a silver deposit, Beatrice. That's why Porter wants this land so badly. Hope and fear warred within her. How would Porter know about it? Someone must have talked. Your father might have confided in someone he trusted or thought he could trust. They emerged from the small mine to find the afternoon waning. Owen carefully wrapped the silver samples in his handkerchief and tucked them into his pocket. We need to get these to an assayer, he said. Confirm what we've found before confronting Porter or the bank. The nearest assayer's office is in Cheyenne, Beatrice pointed out. That's 2 days' ride at least. Owen checked his pocket watch. It's nearly 4 now. If we ride hard, we can make it to the railroad siding by nightfall, catch the midnight train to Cheyenne, and be back by tomorrow evening. Before the bank closes, Beatrice hesitated. That's cutting it very close. It's our only chance. Owen took her hands. Do you trust me, Beatrice? She looked into his eyes, surprised to realize that she did trust him, this stranger who had appeared in her life just 2 days ago. Yes, she said. I do. The ride to the railroad was grueling, across rough country with no clear trail. They arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, saddles sore and dusty but triumphant. The station was little more than a platform and a small building where a telegrapher doubled as ticket agent. Owen purchased 2 tickets while Beatrice secured their horses at the nearby livery. "Train's running late," the agent informed them. "Probably won't be here until after midnight." Owen nodded his thanks and rejoined Beatrice on the platform. Now we wait. They sat side by side on a bench, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. The night was cool and Beatrice shivered despite her shawl. Without a word, Owen removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The gesture was simple, but the warmth of both the coat and the consideration behind it spread through Beatrice like wildfire. "Tell me about Montana," she said, to distract herself from the unsettling awareness of him beside her. Owen leaned back, his shoulder brushing hers. "Big Sky Country, they call it, and it's true the sky seems to go on forever there. The mountains are different from here, more rugged somehow. Winters are harsh, but spring—" He smiled at some memory. "Spring in Montana is worth the wait. You miss it. Parts of it." He glanced at her. "What about you? Have you always lived in Wyoming?" Beatrice nodded. "Born right in that cabin. My parents came west from Pennsylvania before I was born. My father had dreams of building something lasting." She touched her locket. "After they died, keeping the homestead became my way of honoring those dreams." Owen was silent for a moment. "You're the bravest woman I've ever met, Beatrice Lawson," she laughed softly. "Not brave, just stubborn. Stubborn can be good, means you don't give up easy." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Owen's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment, Beatrice thought he might kiss her. The distant whistle of the approaching train broke the spell. They gathered their few belongings and stood as the great iron beast pulled into the station, belching steam and cinders. The journey to Cheyenne passed in a blur of clacking wheels and swaying cars. They arrived as dawn was breaking, the city already bustling despite the early hour. "The assayer's office won't open until 9, Owen said as they made their way through the streets. "We should get some breakfast and clean up." A small hotel near the business district provided rooms where they could wash away the dust of travel. Owen waited in the lobby while Beatrice changed into her one good dress, faded but clean, and pinned up her hair. When she descended the stairs, Owen's expression made her self-conscious. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "You just look different, a good different or a bad different." His smile was slow and warm. "Definitely good." The assayer, a bearded man with spectacles perched on his nose, examined their samples with practiced efficiency. "High-grade silver ore," he confirmed after various tests. "Where did you find it?" "On my property," Beatrice answered. "In Wyoming Territory." The assayer raised his eyebrows. "You've registered the claim, I assume?" "Not yet," Owen interjected. "We wanted to be sure of what we had first." "Well, you have something worth registering, that's for certain." The assayer wrote out an official assessment. "This should help with that process." Armed with the document, they made their way to a bank recommended by the assayer. "We'd like to secure a loan," Owen explained to the manager, presenting the assessment. "Miss Lawson owns property with a proven silver deposit." The manager read the document carefully. "This is impressive, Miss Lawson. However, I understand your property is scheduled for repossession tomorrow." Beatrice's heart sank. "You know about that. Banking circles are small, Miss Lawson. News travels." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "Still, this changes the equation considerably. I believe we could arrange a loan to cover your existing debt and provide capital for developing the mine." "How quickly could this be processed?" Owen asked. The manager consulted his pocket watch. "If we move expeditiously, we could have the papers ready by this afternoon. That would give you time to catch the evening train back to Wyoming." Hope surged within Beatrice. "Then let's move expeditiously, Mr. Palmer, Harold Palmer," the banker smiled. "And it would be my pleasure to assist you, Miss Lawson." By 4 o'clock, Beatrice had signed the necessary papers, and a telegram had been sent to the Promise Creek Bank informing them of the loan and instructing them to halt the property transfer. "We did it," she said as they left the bank, the weight of impending homelessness lifted from her shoulders. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Owen said, taking her hand. "You're going to be a wealthy woman, Beatrice Lawson." The evening train carried them back to Wyoming, and they arrived at the Promise Creek station just as the bank was opening on Monday morning. Mr. Hargrove's expression when they entered was worth every hardship of the past 3 days. "Miss Lawson," he stammered. "We received a most unusual telegram yesterday evening." "I'm sure you did," Beatrice said calmly. "I trust you've complied with its instructions." "Well, there's a complication," Hargrove hedged. "Mr. Porter has already paid for the property." "The paperwork is not yet finalized," Owen interrupted. "As you're well aware," the banker's eyes narrowed. "And you are, Owen Quinn, Miss Lawson's business partner." Hargrove looked from Owen to Beatrice. "I see. Well, this puts me in an awkward position." "Mr. Porter is a valued customer. So is the Cheyenne National Bank," Beatrice pointed out. "And I believe their instructions were quite clear." After much grumbling and several consultations with the telegram, Hargrove finally produced the necessary documents to cancel the sale and register the new loan. "I hope you know what you're doing, Miss Lawson," he said as she signed the last paper. "Mining is a risky business, especially for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Owen said quietly. Outside the bank, Beatrice turned to Owen, suddenly uncertain. "What happens now?" "Now," he smiled. "Now we head back to your land, your silver mine, and start planning. You'll need proper equipment, workers. I don't know the first thing about mining. Lucky for you, I spent 2 years in the silver mines of Nevada." Owen's expression grew serious. "That is, if you still want a partner." Beatrice studied him, this man who had changed her life in the span of 3 days. "Why are you doing this, Owen? Why help me?" "At first, it was because of Porter. I wanted to thwart him." Owen took her hands. "But now it's because I can't imagine being anywhere else but by your side." The honesty in his eyes took her breath away. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're strong and stubborn and brave. I know you love your land and honor your parents' memory. And I know that when I look at you, I see my future." Beatrice's heart raced. "Owen." "You were called too poor to marry," he continued, his voice low and intense. "But your riches are mine, Beatrice, not the silver your spirit, your courage, that's worth more than any mine." Tears pricked her eyes. "Are you proposing, Mr. Quinn?" "Not yet," he said with a smile. "When I do, it'll be proper with a ring and on one knee. But I am declaring my intentions. If you'll have me, I'd like to court you, Beatrice Lawson, while we build something lasting together." In answer, Beatrice rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, there on the boardwalk in front of the Promise Creek Bank. His arms came around her, and for the first time since her parents' death, Beatrice felt like she had come home. "Is that a yes?" Owen murmured against her lips. "That's a yes," she confirmed. "Partner." 5 years later, the Lawson Quinn Silver Mining Company was the largest employer in Promise Creek. The small town had grown into a bustling community with a new school, church, and hotel. Beatrice and Owen had married 3 months after their first kiss, in a simple ceremony attended by the entire town, including Patrick Porter, who had eventually conceded defeat with surprising grace and become one of their most reliable customers for the silver they refined. The old homestead cabin had been expanded into a comfortable house, where their twin daughters, now 3 years old, filled the rooms with laughter and mischief. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Owen took Beatrice to the spring where they had discovered the silver vein. A small monument now marked the spot, dedicated to her parents. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped to help me that day in town?" Beatrice asked as they stood hand in hand. Owen considered the question. "I believe we would have found each other eventually. Some things are just meant to be. Like us, exactly like us." He drew her into his arms. "You know, they said you were too poor to marry, but I was right." "About what?" "Your riches are mine," he whispered. and kissed her as the Wyoming sun set behind them, painting the sky in silver and gold.